Resume our recording. So hello, hello. We are live now on Facebook. Hello to the recording audience. My name is Frank Mocerino. I am the co-founder of the Ohm Store. I am here with Benjamin Irons, professional percussionist, sound healer extraordinaire. I am blessed that I had several incredible personal interactions with Ben when my sweetheart Lauren and I were in Boulder, Colorado this month. Ben, welcome.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on the engagement. That's super exciting.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a long time coming, but we did make the engagement official this weekend. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So when you marry into a sound family, is the dowry some level of like gong infusion or bowl infusion?
It's just actually raw metal. I get 5,000 pounds each of copper and tin, and then it's mine to do what I want with it.
It's basically Settlers of Catan.
That's right. Yeah. So I've got the raw metals and I got to set up my own forge though. And I can do what I want. I can hold it for 100 years and maybe it will go up in value and my family will be generationally wealthy from metals. So yes,
It's a proven formula.
no doubt. Well, I'm just going to welcome Ben. I'm just going to say hello to the folks here in the comments. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of the middle of your day. If you are taking time to be with us live, I know many will be watching the recording, but I see Heike and Bob, welcome back, and Cheryl and Debbie. Ben is waving, as you can see, and says hi. So just a little note, for our real-time audience members, Ben and I are going to have a conversation. My aim is to allow Ben to share his wide expertise and experience, and I think provocative and unique thoughts on the use of sound. And Ben has done some really incredible things with sound beyond professional capacity in areas of service. So my aim here is to ask Ben good questions and to allow Ben, excuse me, to allow Ben as much room as possible to showcase what he's got. And just so you know, again, I had the pleasure of spending time with Ben in person in June in Boulder. So I have been the beneficiary not only of healing with Tibetan singing bowls with Ben, but also really interesting conversations around what he wanted to see for the future of sound, education around it, utilizing it as a modality. And it's an invitation that if something comes up that Ben says, please put some comments or questions into the thread here. And as long as I see it as it's happening and there's an appropriate time, I will surface those to Ben. So that's what we will do, Ben. So why don't we just get started? And would you share, I've shared background information with everyone via email and then also in the Facebook event, but I don't think that that could really encapsulate it. Would you share a little bit about your journey first into your formal musical education and practice, and then into the more esoteric side of things with Tibetan singing bowls and sound healing?
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, it's a big question. It's one of those paths where I think when I look at all of my background, it was sort of inevitable. And I was pleasantly surprised to find out that my conservatory experiences were kind of the medical school that I didn't know I was attending at the time. But those experiences have been invaluable now in kind of my new realm. But yeah, I came out of just a kind of standard secondary school, like public school band program. And as I went off to my undergraduate program, was torn between medicine and music, and there's a lot of overlap in those worlds. So when you're in the music world, there's even at certain like large state schools, there's often programs that are pairing your like music minor with pre-med or pre-law. Like these are kind of like bundled in together pretty frequently. But yeah, just ended up falling in love with orchestral music, and I went to study at Phoenix Symphony as soon as I got out of school, and quickly found myself on some pretty high-level stages with the Los Angeles Philharmonic and San Diego Symphony, Hawaii Symphony, Colorado Symphony, Phoenix, many, 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 many more. So I've done my time on stages. I've done my time schlepping gear around, and but along the way, noticed that one avenue of our professional training that either folks were not sure about how to proceed, weren't willing to own their own vulnerability with it, or just sort of wanted to be in denial, was around the realm of music performance anxiety. So, what happens when we're in high pressure, high stress situations, when we've chosen a vocation that is desperately underfunded in this country, and but a huge part of every avenue of our culture. I mean, you can't go anywhere without hearing music from John Williams, and that's an amazing thing. So yeah, just as I got into the professional realm, was looking for answers to kind of deal with my own mental chatter, found my way into meditation, then hypnotherapy, and eventually into sound therapy. And the first time I felt a Himalayan bowl in my heart center, I was like, oh yeah, we're doing this now. And I recognize that I'm in a rare crossroads where I have formal meditation training. I'm a board certified hypnotherapist. I'm a professional musician, but I'm also deeply interested in these old esoteric, as you said, sort of folk medicines that are on the verge of going extinct. So it's interesting that it's such a budding sort of novelty at the moment, this like hot button of sound wellness, when this medicine is thousands of years old. And the folks that have tried to safeguard those secrets, you and I had talked about, it's really interesting trying to be cautiously aware of cultural appropriation for a tradition and heritage that we can't really pin down.
Yeah.
So trying to stay open-minded with where these practices come from and honoring those histories and legacies, while also recognizing that we are really writing the narrative for this medicine in real time, and the decisions that we're making now as practitioners, as trained sound workers, are going to deeply impact the next 200 or 500 years of where this goes.
That is, I remember I'm feeling it now in my body, like having this conversation and it being really resonant when we had this. I think Nick was involved too.
Yeah.
And would you share, so for the folks here that weren't privy to that, maybe just give them a sense, because there's so many like first timers here and then folks who are like as well versed as you can be about the history of this. Will you talk about the history that we do know? And then speak a little bit to what you said about like we're effectively writing the narrative now.
Yeah, so I like, we tend to aggrandize or overindulge in maybe the significance of these instruments in the past. And so it's always interesting when we come across these sort of theories or philosophies like, oh, these would have been used in Egyptian temples, these would have come out of, Atlantis. It's like, we don't have any documentation
Mm.
for any of
Yeah.
that. And when we look, what we can study is the metallurgy. What we can study is the natural evolution of the instruments themselves. And so it's interesting when we see different aspects of like the Himalayan bowls, the metal bowls, for example, that do tend to showcase Persian metal making techniques from 500 years previously to when we were thinking about these as coming on the scene in the Himalayas. And so being open to this being a global part of our genetics. If you've ever been to the Music Instrument Museum in Phoenix, one of my favorite things about it is that they break down and they organize the music from each continent down into the country, and you get to see both the physical instruments there, recordings and video of indigenous or local persons playing it. So you really get this multifaceted deep dive into like how these instruments came to be. And what really stood out to me is cultures that would have had no interaction with one another, from South America to Poland to Australia, places that would have been deeply pulled apart, all kind of figured out the same types of instruments. So everyone has some sort of mouth harp or flute, some sort of box with a skin strapped over it, some sort of box with a resonating string. I think that that is an incredibly profound piece of our evolution as a species, that we have this genetic program drive to create sound around us. So while yes, we like to focus on, oh, wouldn't this be great if it came out of Nubian temples, or wouldn't this be great if this was used by the highest level of lamas that we've ever seen? A lot of that we can't verify, and a lot of it we're kind of placing there, and it's hard to know with like a white colonizer sort of perspective of like, well, how much of this was eradicated by the people that came before, which is what we're
Mm.
trying to be aware of, or stolen or subdued. And And how much of it do we know for sure? So at the moment, the way that the industry stands is we make crystal bowls in this country. That's where they came from. They're a modern instrument. Saxophone is older than crystal bowls. So it's okay, and that's okay. It's not a judgment. It's fine, but we can own that and move forward with it, and not get caught up in a lot of the unverifiable, fantasies of where it might have come from.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, it's really like empowering. Um, and so that leaves me with like this idea of when there is no past, right? We're not exactly sure. We're people without a history, a little bit where we're like, we're looking at this and the original, like the inclination is immediately to be like, okay, let me look to the past to inform how I'm going to behave in the future. And it's crazy, be right? Because like every other thing that we deal with in our lives is effectively in that way. When we're dealing with other religious or spiritual traditions, we can often go back thousands of years and say, like, okay, this can really inform how I can behave now and how I can behave in the future because we don't really know, right? Like the traditions, all we know is that there's something about it. I was thinking about it a little bit this morning, and I was thinking, gosh, like these are just self-evident. It's like you hear the sound of a gong or a Tibetan bowl, and it does something to you, and there's no history to connect it to. So what's the opportunity ahead of us? Or really, let me go more directed. As we are writing the narrative, right? Because we don't necessarily have one to rely on about what happened in the past. What narrative would you like to see written?
So I'm at a really cool crossroads where I've seen, and I've discussed this before with various folks, that I'm seeing two parallel tracks of, and I'm coming from a percussion standpoint. So that's my background. That's where my expertise lies. That's where I feel like I can be most in my zone and of most benefit to this industry. So what I'm seeing is this parallel track of two rails of percussion heritages. So there's a Western track that I came out of that comes from Western music from Europe and is primarily affluent white dudes with a lot of time and money and maybe a religious sort of background or primarily Christian background, whether or not they were writing secular or sacred music. But this track is extremely technically proficient. It relies on mastery, like truthfully, like disciplined, focused, strategic repetition of informed techniques from a teacher that's working with you directly with direct feedback. And a lot of it is rear facing. So the bulk of the message is if you played 1,000 notes in a row, not, hey, congrats, you played 999 of those perfectly. They're going to slam you for the one that didn't align with what your intention was. And that doesn't always feel good. But the mental health on that side is really challenging because you're really in this pressure cooker of extremely highly competitive performance practices in a world where the budget and for our arts is dwindling by the day. It's not even little orchestras now, but major symphonies that are constantly rolling in and out of performance strikes to get just basic cost of living. So it's a struggle right now. Simultaneously, there was this Eastern track of sort of intuitive percussion. So the Nada yoga and these maybe folk drummers or people that came out of a family lineage of some sort, whether they were gong makers and bowl makers, whether they were kalimba artists of Africa whose grandparents come and download the songs of their people to them in their dreams. I mean, the ethnomusicological studies around this are very cool. So the technique is a little from our side of the Western percussion a little shaky. It's inconsistent. We hear a lot of terms that it's like, well, we've already analyzed this to death. We know what works within our own sphere. So it's strange to see like the terms that get kind of created around it, and it's frustrating because it's like you don't have to make up a word for that. Like we have a word. So
Yeah.
my favorite is on someone's retail site they called the gong mallet a gonger striker. It's like a gonger striker. I mean, striker, I don't love that term, but that's close. But gonger? I guess you're the gonger. So does the striker hit the gong? It's like we don't have to do this. It's a mallet. Just call it a mallet. We know what it is. But their wellness is through the roof. They're so happy and joyful, and they're of
Uh,
service, and they're in connection. They're aspiring for something bigger than themselves. And so I really want to see these two worlds come together where we can lean on each other, use this sound worker sacred sound side to lean on the really informed technical aspects, not with the goal of mastery, but in the show The Bear that just came out, I love this line really early on that you cannot achieve greatness without consistency. And it's not about the greatness part of it for us. It's like we cannot avoid traps and pitfalls or recreate really precious, beautiful moments if you don't know how you got there. It's like that Isla de Muerta from Pirates of the Caribbean. Like it's not really like it can only be found by those who know where it already is. Like we know where it is. We can show you the pathway to that. So really leaning on those two. So having the Eastern side lean on the technical expertise of the Western practitioners, but have the Western practitioners get out of their head for a change, relax, enjoy their craft, enjoy their art, be of service to the other half of the community that way. I think that would be insanely cool.
Yes, right on. Okay, so a blending, taking what's beneficial from both sides of this coin, and working together to build essentially something that works. But also the last thing that I hadn't necessarily thought about before, not only something that works, but something that we can like leave breadcrumbs to and know how it is that we are arriving at these experiences or this path.
Yeah, those breadcrumbs are vitally important. So it's not just a facilitation, but there's an energetic component of that, which gets into some high level philosophy around morphic resonance. This is one of the things about this medicine that I love so much is that at any given moment, I'm I like having the challenge of being fluent more or less in the percussion, the quantum mechanics, the anatomy, the psychoacoustics, the geopolitical components, the psychology, the spirituality. Like there are so many pieces to tie together. There's no
Yeah.
reason to ever be bored or think you're done and you've finished and learned it all. Like there it will never ever happen.
Would you
Oh, but
talk
the
about morphic resonance?
yes, thank you. So the morphic resonance, essentially, I noticed through COVID that one of the biggest uh, weightiest components for practitioners was feeling the isolation, being removed from their students and their classes, being removed from their practitioners who were facilitating, and just
Yeah.
being like thrown into this isolation. It's what we had to do in the moment to protect ourselves while we took in more data and figured out how to make informed steps forward. But
Yeah.
what we forget is that one of the draws to this instrument, to these instruments, it's the voice of the bull, the voice of the gongs, is within that sound itself. And one of my favorite meditations is as you sit there with it is like, where is it coming from? Like, where am I hearing it? Like, I know it's coming from the rim, but like, it doesn't seem like it's like sometimes it's in your own head, sometimes it's far away, sometimes you're melded and meshed with it, and this vibrational kind of weaving that interplay that's happening. But along those lines is if you ever feel alone, if you ever feel isolated in this practice, if you ever just feel misunderstood, just knowing that there are thousands of years of practitioners that have come before you, which I know is a little bit hypocritical, just saying like, we don't know where this comes from. We don't know what the future is. But realistically, we do know that we've been
Yeah.
making these instruments for a long time. And there are practitioners who have sat with these instruments for their entire lives, playing them, putting the vibrations out with their positive, healing, transformational intention, most likely with a voice or a chant of some sort. Now, this energy can't be created or destroyed, right? It's just traveling. So, whether or not our ears are still able to pick up on it is a different question. But these vibrations, those good vibes, they're still traveling.
Huh.
So, when you feel isolated, all you have to do is take a deep breath, allow yourself to play this instrument, the bowl or the gongs, allow your voice to come forward and feel yourself supported and locked into the river of all of those ascended masters and venerated ancestors that came before you. They're there to support you. So you have the support of thousands of years of these folks, but more importantly, by participating in that, you're laying out the stepping stones for every practitioner that comes behind us. You are part of this active support system, whether or not you're aware of that. And so it's vitally cool to play these instruments every day because you're connecting thousands of years of this, holographic information with what we're going to be creating and teeing up next.
I just had a whoa dude moment. That was wonderful. Wow. Yes. Okay. Um, that is, I don't want to just like start jumping to cliches, but that was so powerful.
Thank you.
Specifically in the way that you described, practitioners for thousands of years, chanting, playing the bowls, that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So there is a river of sound and mantra still, out there that we can tap into. That's really something.
Thank you. It's
That is
fun.
really something.
Yeah, it feels great when you're just if you're ever in a spot and you're like, I don't really know what to do next. Well, when in doubt, do nothing. This is a mindfulness thing. Like we're so close as we're so quick as humans to want to like get involved, get like manhandle or human handle, people handle, whatever the PC version of that is. Get tangibly, try to take control of a situation. But from a mindfulness perspective and from our nervous system regulation, when in doubt, do less. Just kind of give it a second. Like they will show you what to do. Those resonant, that entrainment of that field will be there to support you when you're ready and you're listening for it.
Oh my. Okay. That is big. And now it's making me feel like I want to go backwards. So you
Sure.
mentioned the first time that you ever had a Tibetan style bowl placed over your heart. I think like these like foundational triggering exercises or watershed moments are really interesting to explore. Could you say more about what that was for you, what that was like?
Sure. So I came from a lineage. I studied at the Atma Buddhi Sound and Vibrational School, which is here in
Yeah.
Boulder. It's a higher educational continuing CE like credit program, which is one of the reasons I was drawn to it. I think it's an important thing when folks are looking for who to study with or where to go to kind of take their next steps to really ask like, well, why am I choosing this teacher? Is it some sort of pedigree? Is it an energy? Is it a reputation? Um, I get the sense that not everyone really knows why they're going to see someone, and that's okay too. Like you might
Mhm.
just be taking a chance. Like you're in an area, and if you're not in New York and there aren't people every 3 feet away, yeah, it's going to be a little bit harder to
Yeah.
be discerning. But I came to study with someone who I appreciated their heritage to the closeness. Like so Master Seren Shrestha had grown up in Nepal. His family is generations of shaman that are charged with guarding the Manakamana temple. So his family has a very specific legacy within Nepal. And I wanted to learn that medicine, and it just kind of spoke to me in that time where I was working at a sound meditation corporate style kind of venue. Uh, but ironically, no one was certified in meditation and no one was a musician. So you're like, okay, so you're selling sound meditation subscriptions, but none of you can play these instruments and none of you can lead a meditation. Like what is happening here? And there's this really ironic lack of mindfulness in that. But anyway, so I came to study with someone who I thought aligned with my values and sort of went through the same process of as if I was picking a Western teacher. Like
Yeah.
I different orchestras sound different, different teachers have different specialties. And so you kind of go with like, okay, well, I really like playing cymbals, and St. Louis Symphony has one of the best cymbal players in the world, and I love his sound. So I'm going to go to St. Louis and study with this person. And so it's sort of in that master apprenticeship lexicon.
Yeah.
And I was in this class and I try to set my expectation aside. Like, not everyone's a percussionist, not everyone should be teaching percussion, but that's not why I was there.
Yeah.
But really was drawn, like you said, to the sound. Just immediately was pulled into it. And I'm a like a bronze guy, like caveman. So I know we're getting into this age of Aquarius where we've got quartz in our watches and our phone. Well, does anyone wear a watch? Our phones and our crystal bowls and our computers and things. But
Yeah.
I like my bowls made of bronze. I like my triangles and my cymbals. I like my gongs are bronze, obviously, but as opposed to silver nickel. So I have that connection to these types of instruments.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were going through our training, and just because I was interested in somatic and polyvagal theory, because I had this background in performance anxiety specialization. My mom is a retired chemistry and biology teacher. My dad is a retired physician at a high level from the Mayo Clinic. So there's a lot of science and not questionable thinking, but the thinking pattern that we were taught growing up was like you ask a lot of questions, you design protocols to test those questions, and recognizing that science is not a truth, it's a process, and will always be replaced by better science. So I think that's another pitfall that we run into is where we get stuck on very outdated information about how this medicine works. We're not in Newtonian physics, we're in quantum mechanics. We can only measure so much, but I do want
Yeah.
to try to connect with the data when I can. But having that bowl in that room with someone who comes from a practice that's deeply grounded in spirituality and shamanism, who has been surrounded by these instruments and their traditional uses for his entire life, uh, really did inform like, oh my God, like there wasn't even a choice. Just I've never felt this good at the orchestra, or more specifically, everything I did at the orchestra was selfish, in the sense of that I was chasing the perfect touch on my perfectly chosen instrument at the right time in the right moment. And you just want to like sit and savor that while you're in your tails and everyone is there to see you. But that's all ego. Like that's all for me. Like that's not a lot of service that comes in that. And if people enjoy it, that's great. But that's not why I was there. I was there to like, oh, I made a paycheck playing triangle tonight, which I love.
Yeah.
But this is so different. I mean, this really changes like my nervous system regulation. I sleep so much better. And the biggest part is when my father first came in for a session, he set up, I specialize in vibrational sound therapy, just so everyone's clear. I do work with sound bath meditations, but I primarily focus on one-on-one sessions for stress-related conditions. But my
Quick
father's a
aside, if you are near Boulder, Colorado, I highly recommend getting in touch with Ben, Zen with Ben on Instagram. Lauren and I went for 1 or 2 sessions, but I went for 3 sessions when we were there in like 2 weeks. It was wonderful. So if you're near Boulder, find Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, my dad sat up on the table and he said, you know, I think there's more happening here than anything we learned in medical school. And I was like, whoa, okay, let's unpack that now. So he's been helping me sort of design and consider sort of different protocols and like low key studies. Like I didn't go to medical school, but I do what I can to stay informed. I'm reading as much as I can. I ask questions. I talk to people. I always verify my sources, and yeah, trying to really keep it's not just the optics because the legitimacy of this is solid, but without a
Yeah.
governing body, it's really hard to control what's seen as legitimate and what's not.
So you're working toward, or not working toward, you're actively working to quantify what's going on in these experiences. I don't really know that before I had met you and you told me about that. I don't think anybody else had. I mean, there might be other people doing it, but I don't know of them. Would you share about like what you're doing to quantify or try to quantify these experiences and what you've been finding?
Sure, there's some pretty wild technologies. A lot of them exist outside of what my small business budget can afford, but there's this new like $10,000 machine. I think it's at UCLA, like the Curian photography, I think, right? So it'll take your aura, but it'll measure everything inside as well. And it's like, that's pretty cool. I just have a small kind of entry level EEG. So I'm really
Yeah.
interested in brainwave activity during the sound sessions. I want to know, is there a point consistently for people? Like, is it 10 minutes in, 20 minutes in, 40 minutes in? What happens at 3 hours in? I'm watching the different brainwave states to see, are there repeatable, informed protocols that will, if I do this with this every time, does it yield similar results? Now, we're not all that simple. So I don't accept that every human will take like if we always play like 256 hertz at this dynamic for this amount of time, I don't think it's that simple. And in
Right.
my lineage, intention always supersedes any of those things. But I have, a little pulse oximeter. I'm watching people's temperature. I watch to see how their pulse changes. I think heart rate variability, if I could do that as a study, would be fascinating. But really, I'm just sort of watching to see how we go from the beginning of a session and people are in very activated, all the these different brainwave states, the delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, they're all happening at the same time. It's just which one has the strongest presence at a given moment. And I want to see, and I have seen, how throughout these sessions, people from their active beta states calm down and the decibel level, so the strength of those brainwave states start to turn down, but the theta and alpha starts to turn up, which means that our brain does shift from an active state to a state of rest and relaxation in these sessions. but I can show you where consistently that starts to happen. And what's really cool is when you start to see prominent anomalies within that related to the techniques that you're employing. So there's a certain technique with a bowl inside of the biofield, not even on the body itself, that whenever this technique happens, and I'm so sorry, I'm not going to share it here. I'll publish it eventually.
Okay.
There's typically a 15 or 20 decibel spike in alpha and theta brainwave activity when this happens,
Whoa.
which is substantial
Yeah.
and technical.
Wow.
Basically, what that means is I can now show in a biofield with technology that when the bull does this thing through a field, there are repeatable results that lead to an immediate increase and significant increase in relaxation brainwaves.
Writing that future narrative. I will
That's it.
eagerly be awaiting the results of that. And beyond the results, I imagine I may have experienced something like
Yeah.
that when I was with you personally.
Yeah. Now that I know, I'm not going to not do it for people.
Another reason to go see Ben personally if you're visiting Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, I might have you sign a form if you come and see me. We might do a little study while you're here. It just depends. I don't have one open right now, but I'm designing a new one.
I love that. That's incredible. Okay, wow. Let me check really quickly here. Okay, because I know people are super into this. Yes, okay. So people are asking like post his page, post his page. I will post Ben's page. And before I do that, Zen with Ben on Instagram. I think is that the best way to follow?
Yeah, I'm not
Okay.
on social as much anymore. I'm kind of waiting to see how everything with AI shakes out, but everything for
Yeah,
sure is on my website, which is zenwithben.me,
amazing.
which sounds selfish, but I don't feel like a .com, but I do feel like a .me, so that felt right.
I like
And there
it.
are early research studies on there. There's a research tab, and so I try to when I find other peer-reviewed, credited articles, I try to bring those in. So Dr. Tamara Goldsby from San Diego does a lot of really cool work, and then my results are there as well.
Wild. Okay. And somebody, Tiffany, thank you. Tiffany found your website and posted it. So you can go get that. Okay. I never have the opportunity to speak with a professional gong percussionist who also is a master of like vibrational sound healing. So I want to ask some basic questions because I don't think that like there's many people that have these two areas of expertise. So let's start basic and then you can kind of share as much as you'd like. Okay, and assuming that we're talking bronze, as you
Mhm.
mentioned before, like a bronze gong and a bronze singing bowl, what is the experiential or qualitative difference between these two instruments primarily?
I don't know that I think it comes down to subjective choice. So
Okay.
my interpretation of them is a little bit, I, I don't know if I'm ready to share what I think is but happening, but I like a balance of both. So some people are really drawn to the gongs, some people are really drawn to the bowls. I actually think, well, and they both have a balance of energies. And so this starts to feel like pardon me, it gets a little bit more woo. I think that the gongs have a little bit more masculine energy than the
Hmm.
bulls do. Myself, people seem to have varying opinions on that. Totally fine. In my personal experience, it seems women are deeply drawn to the gongs, and I start to wonder if that's an expression of an underlying cultural dissonance where there are fewer and fewer totally safe environments for women or female energy to be vulnerable and safe with healthy masculine energy. And I don't
Interesting.
know that this is what's happening, but I'm watching for this because I think it is interesting. There's a pattern right now with in my personal sphere where a lot of the women near and dear to me are kind of at this place of just exhaustion and exacerbation. And they're like, it's so nice to hear when people think that I'm strong and resilient and all these things, but really, I don't want that message. I want us to create a world where I don't have to be strong all the time, where I
Hmm.
don't have to face challenges and grind it out every second of the day. I just want to be safe to relax and be vulnerable and to process what's happening. Totally. So I think trying to feel into and also for my hypnotherapy training, there are vocal cues. So when I do my intake with my clients, I'm asking specific questions and I'm listening for different cues. And those cues help me determine which instruments might be beneficial to a session. Sometimes people just ask me point blank, like, "Hey, I haven't gotten gongs in a while. We should do that." I'm like, "Cool, let's do gongs." I like both. I think as a practitioner, I'm a little bit more dialed in through the bowls. I think I can target energy centers a little bit more precisely that way. But I like the gongs as far as holding space and really treating a bioenergy field as a large kind of almost like a weighted blanket of sound.
Wow. Okay. Oh my gosh. Every question gets better and better in terms of what you're able to share with us. Okay, so now so we've drawn that interesting distinction between gong and singing bowl. Now I think I would like to take like another basic step, but will be beneficial because not many people, most people in like my circle have experienced singing bowls in the form of what you call like a sound bath, right? They've gone to their yoga studio for a special Wednesday night session, and the practitioner has maybe like a setup of crystal singing bowls with a couple of bronze bowls thrown in there, and they experience things mostly audibly. They're probably like several feet away from the instruments. What you do is something different, and I wonder if maybe you could just expand for people a little bit on these two very distinct things, knowing that I would say like 99% of people have probably experienced like a sound bath where they're at a distance and not something like what you are focused on.
Yeah, so thanks. It's a good question, and it comes up frequently for people. It's like, well, what's the difference between a sound bath and sound therapy? And it really comes down to the intention of the practitioner, honestly, because you could totally have a sound bath that is a form of sound therapy and vice versa. The way that I frame it, I think, from my background, is that I like my meditations to be a meditation,
Mm,
and for me that means it's an active process. So you're there as a participant to actively engage and observe, honing focus and concentration and being in the present moment, and using whatever the focal point of the meditation structure is as your guide through it. So if it's sound or the breath or vibrations on the body. So sound therapy for me is a passive process. So that's for me is one-on-one. If my clients want to meditate and actively engage, breath work, chanting along, totally great. I'm happy to assist you with that. Most people fall asleep, and that's totally fine. I'm going to keep working. The bowls are going to keep working anyway. The other primary difference is that for me in a sound bath meditation, we are primarily taking in the sound through the air, as you mentioned. I mean, truthfully, how we receive sound is primarily through skin and bone conduction. The air is mainly tertiary, but
yeah.
certainly we are primed to interpret sounds through our ears. But I really love our lineage for sound healing because we do surround the body with singing bowls. We do bowls. We put the bowls directly on the body to put that vibration deeply in. And vibration, like bowls on the body, has a deeply grounding effect. But if you're a client of mine that says, like, I just feel stuck, I've been in this rut, I can't get out of this hole, I feel like I'm not getting momentum, sticking you deeper into that rut is not going to help you. We have to get you out of that zone. But if you're really scattered and flighty, you feel like you just can't keep track of anything, you're spread really thin, all the vocal cues tell you everything. Well, then a bunch of chimes off in the distance isn't going to help you. Your energy's already way out there. We got to coalesce, we got to unify,
Mm,
bring all that back. So it really should be a balance of both.
yeah. Yeah. Right on. Okay. I like that. When you're doing a session, how do you balance? You have a deep well of specialized technical knowledge and information. Um, Now, when I was working with you directly, it wasn't like, during that I was aware of that. I was like totally blissed out. I think the first session I fell asleep for like 40 minutes. Um, but how do you balance when you're actually like working with someone, the intuitive versus the deep well of technical knowledge that you're drawing from? What's that like for you?
Certainly. And it's a great challenge because I do want to make sure that I'm on this plane using informed techniques so that I am fully in control of what's happening. But there is certainly an intuitive component that I cannot deny that I'll never fully understand or be able to measure. And I don't want to ignore that either because that had so much fun and magic to it, but I don't want to like do exclusively that. So the first thing that I do is I have a series of practitioner anchors that I establish for myself that keep me neutral and tethered. So I'm not too forward into my client's space and their experience where maybe I'm leaning into my own ego or out of that kind of shamanic balance.
Yeah.
But I don't want to check out either. I almost I have a phone with me in the room, but I'm not on it. It's because many people ask me to take photos while I'm while I'm working, and sometimes I forget. But I'm certainly not, going to focus on a client, invite a bull, take a deep breath and ground, and then send a tweet and then go back. Like that, that doesn't feel good either.
Yeah.
But that being said, because I have an informed consistency that I've developed, and again, from that Western side, not trying to push some sort of like dogmatic mastery, tyrannical approach of you didn't play that bull right. It just, I don't know how you would possibly learn the language of your instrument without having some sort of consistency in practice. So there's a baseline. So we as humans are verb beings. We tend to think of ourselves as noun beings, as fused pieces of flesh and bone that just exist as this steel plate that moves through the earth and hacks its way through, grocery store queues or sitting in traffic. But really, we're vibrational beings. We're shimmering in and out of existence at a rapid rate. These instruments, same thing. So when I'm meditating, I just try to encapsulate the bull. Like the bull surrenders to gravity, it releases any tension within itself, and it allows itself to vibrate freely and just be in the present moment with its voice. They have no concept of politics, of religion, of language, of history, of geopolitical lines. They're simply there to put, literally pump harmony into the atmosphere. That's what they're for. So I'm listening at that baseline for what each bowl exists as. And if there's an anomaly to that baseline based off of you'll have to look at my resume and trust me that when I invite consistently, I know what I'm doing. If it is anomalous in any way, that bowl is telling me something. There's something physical or energetic that's creating tension or a block that bowl is working to calibrate. So these are stable tones that are fixed calibrations. We are not. So that's why we use these instruments to affect our own vibrational homeostasis because we can calibrate and entrain to them. I know that was a
Uh,
word salad.
I mean, I am with it. I think, yes, and the folks here with us are with it. But like, if I had to repeat back to you something that is most impactful, it's like the imagining of being the bull, and specifically what I remember hearing is surrendering to gravity, and the bull isn't living in resistance; it's being invited, and then doing what it does to like move that energy through itself until the energy is complete. A small thing that many people listening may not have picked up on, or may have picked up on and thought that it was curious. You use the term invite the bull rather than strike or play. Can you
Mm.
share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that gets into a little bit of a hippie lexicon as well, but I like it. So we, I like the challenge of using terminology that is nonviolent. So if the gong is the
That makes
teacher,
sense for what you're up to.
yeah, if the gong is the teacher and the bull is the teacher, we never. And this comes from my percussion training, well, from the Western side as well. So we never hit a drum. That is so haphazard, and I think that's a lot of what folks do. They walk up and they hit the instrument. And
Yeah.
I remember the first time I met a gong master, they were coming to check in for a meditation, and they said, "Oh, I'm so and so. I'm here for my meditation." And I guess I looked nonplussed. And they, I was like, "Oh, okay." And they said, "Well, don't you know who I am? I'm so and so. I'm a gong master." I was like, Do you know who I am? Like that's a two-way street. I don't. Why are we? What is this game? I thought you were here to meditate. Also, I've been playing percussion for 30 years. I don't know what that means. You've just never missed. Like if you hit it, it's gonna make a sound, but that doesn't make you a master at it. I would never call myself a master at this. But yeah, I think because it is such an approachable instrument that has such an immediate draw and pretty immediate relaxation, depending on how it's played. And I did not forget your question, I promise.
Oh no, I'm with you.
It can be a little deceptive to people, and they can trick themselves into this sort of ego trap of like, I am so great at this because I can play it. It's just like, I don't, you just never missed. I really don't understand. So with that combative sort of nature, then in our formal training there are different stroke types, and we call them, it just depends on what you're trying to execute. um, but because these are almost anthropomorphized instruments, because we do view them as a source of knowledge and a source of transformation, we do hold them to a higher standard than I do my triangles and I love my triangles. I don't want to downplay that. Like I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a triangle and tambourine specialist. That's my role at the orchestra. I have many, many, many of those instruments, and they're deceptively tricky. I think triangle is exponentially harder to play than gong, but it's not a teacher for me. The gong is the teacher for me. So we don't want to hit the teacher. We don't want to beat the teacher. We never strike the teacher. And even
Mhm.
striker I have a hard time with as an implement,
Yeah,
but it's another name for the mallet itself.
yeah.
But instead we do invitation. So I am working in collaboration with my teachers to say, hey, I would like to employ this sound with intention, and then whatever my intention is, whether it's transformation or healing energy or presence and mindfulness or introspection, whatever it might be, we're going to work together. And as my teacher, I would like to invite your voice to join my presence of breath or intention, and we'll work together to figure out what it is that we're here to do. So I always try to invite the sound. And what I've noticed is that if you remember, I think we talked about this, that sort of magnetic push and pull. When you're little kids, you have two magnets with the same polarity,
Yeah.
and they won't let them come near each other. Some of these instruments are very, very old. This bowl is 500 years old. If I had a drum from 500 years old, it would be total garbage. But this is gorgeous, and it has its own experience. And what I love about it is if I take good care of it, this bowl will be with me my whole life, my whole career. But I am one small chapter as a steward of this instrument. It's had many owners before me. It's worked for a long time in this industry. I do not presume to know anything more than this bowl knows. So this is my team captain. I default to it. And if I am in the present moment, if I go to invite sound and truly invite, not force my will on this instrument, but work together collaboratively, if this instrument's still working and I'm like interrupting it, it'll stop me. You can feel it with the mallet that there's like an energetic resistance like rubber. And if you're there and you're really tuned in, I do a lot of times in the session, like, I'm sorry, you're right, my fault, my fault. And give it a chance to finish speaking. We're so quick to interrupt in this country.
Whoa. Wow.
That's where the
That was,
intuition comes in.
yeah. Oh my gosh. What has it been like for you? Was the intuition with the bowls and the teachers like a development process, and for you to like allow that to happen?
Yes and no. I mean, they made themselves known to me pretty quickly, and I think
Okay.
because I came from a mindfulness background and really focus on my breath. I love this about the Amabuti training is it's not really the sound. I mean, the sound is deeply helpful, but it's really the silence plays an equally important role. So
Hmm.
we're in training and calibrating our energy centers with the sound, but it can only integrate in those silences. If you keep whacking at it, your body doesn't have a chance to like just figure out like what is the pulsing, the silent pulse that we're trying to re-entrain and get back to. It can't hear its own, voice as it's trying to. It's too many things talking. So I love that in my lineage, we really try to connect to the breath, really try to come back to the present. And in those moments, because I'm practiced in slowing down, maybe it's the percussion training from the orchestra where sometimes we're playing 1,000 notes a second, or we have one triangle note per 40 minutes and you have to wait and be patient. But it gives you a chance to really explore how your energy feels in relation to those instruments and allowing them the space to do their work effectively.
Wow. Yes. I wanted to take a question that came in. I think it's a very I think it's a question that I've seen many people be curious about. So I'll just ask it and you can interpret it in any way that you'd like to share. So Lori was asking, when you're using bowls on the body, do you align notes with chakras? Like and she asked specifically, is your goal to balance chakras?
I think it's a really nice jumping off point. I think having some sort of meridian system, not matrix system, I'm going to say. I like the meridian, but I'm
Okay.
still learning it. I think having some sort of matrix as your underlying principle for your intention is really important, but the intention always supersedes all of those things. So there is no universal, like this note always treats this chakra. By the way, how many chakras? Is it four? Is it seven? Is it 10? 100? Like that's not, we're not even in agreement
Mm.
on that.
Yeah.
So how do we agree on the other things? But yeah, we do have a chakra system in our school that we're aligned with. It's not the Vedic system. It's based off of a circle of fifths as opposed to seconds,
Yep.
which I like better because then I can work with adjacent chakras and keep them in a really balanced tonal harmony of always having those fifths.
Yep.
But that being said, I think one of the most effective protocols from the Amabuti school is the very first one. It's a two bowl system. It's one bowl at the crown, it can be any bowl, and one bowl on the body, it can be any bowl. And you
Yep.
can do incredible work with just those two bowls. But I do think that we get a little wrapped up in the pitches and the frequencies. But I understand when you're not a musician, you have to jump in and grab some sort of rung on a ladder, and that's the closest ring that most people can grab onto.
Yeah, I mean, Lauren and I, when we first, I mean, I think I got Seren's book in 2018 or 2019. It's called How to Heal with Singing Bowls, I think. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Correct.
And we would just like, I would lay Lauren down on the ground and I would do like one at the crown and one under body, and we would experiment in that way.
Yeah. And I think starting off in a simple way like that is really telling. I was just talking with a student of mine that when you see young drum set players, and I was like this myself, you want the biggest kit that you can get. I wanted like
Mhm.
six toms and like two bass drums. And it's not because it's cool. I mean, it's certainly cool, but when you're new, you're not sure about how to get the variation, the interest, the nuance that you want. So you have to create that through many different shades manually. But
Yeah.
when you see really professional drummers, they'll Buddy Rich has a three-piece kit. I mean, like, and he's a master. Like, there's no question. So, or four-piece kit. So, they're developing their skills and language where they can do so much more with less. But in order to do that, and I just published a book called Sound Bath Conversations, and it's all about what happens when you combine two or three contrasting sounds only in like 2,000 different scenarios. Because I think until we understand how, this bowl and this bowl relate to each other, how could I possibly understand how this one and this one relate, or how this and that relates? And so I view them all as almost social relationships. So you're just getting to know your own teammates and how they work together. And the way that they work together might have nothing to do with what we view as a tuning system after the fact. It might be something purely about those two unique instruments.
That is spot on. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. It's really helpful. It's really helpful. And I'll never forget you referring to the 500-year-old bull as your team captain. That's
Yeah.
really memorable. I love that. Someone is asking if you could share. So you've mentioned, I think one or two times about kind of intention superseding and everything.
Mhm.
And there's a question that's really, I think, interesting, which is effectively like, what intention are you setting when you're working with someone? Like, what is that intentionality?
Yeah, that's not up to me. That's up to the client. So I am just there to facilitate. So this is always a direct question I have with my clients
Yeah.
before we begin. It's the key to hypnotherapy. So all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. I'm just there to help facilitate. The most effective hypnotherapy is when you, as the client, have outlined with your voice and your words what the transformation is, looks, and feels like to you. And then my job is to craft language around that to help you step into that new vision of yourself. So I would never, I wouldn't think, try to impose my own intention for a client. Other than that, I want to be of service. So maybe my intention is just to be present and open, to be fully with my team here so that I can be of best service to my client and their intention. But I want to know what their intention is too so that I'm aligned with it. Again, if your intention is to, I've just been so scattered, I just kind of want to come back and feel calm, and I haven't communicated that or we haven't talked about that, and then I'm like playing gong in another room with rain stick or something, we're not going to be aligned, and you're not going, it's not that you won't have a great experience, but it's you missed an opportunity to have the experience that your wisdom of your own body is telling you you need.
Hmm. How can you imagine the intentionality would change if you were in front of a group of 10?
Yeah, so in those cases, then I'm asking them to set their own intention silently,
Okay.
like through the meditation, right? And then my intention remains the same, just to be present and to hold enough space. If you don't have a mindfulness or some sort of contemplative practice and you're working with these instruments,
Yeah.
your participants will only ever feel as comfortable with silence as you are. So I would caution you not to um, facilitate longer than you're comfortable to hold space for,
Yeah.
and certainly to record yourself and make sure that you're allowing enough space within those moments for everyone to stay connected with their intention. But maybe my intention shifts more to my practitioner anchors to keep me neutral.
Hmm. Okay. What should be What are the considerations is someone is listening to this and is like, I want to like go down this path? And there'll be like varying degrees of musical background and musical training. But imagine like you're speaking to these folks, which you are, so you don't have to imagine it. How would you answer that? Like what would, if someone's like, wow, I like what Ben's all about, and I really want to be able to facilitate that sort of experience for people, what should they do?
It's a huge question. I'm so glad you asked because it's come up a lot this week. I was just joking, well, not joking. I was talking with a friend of mine about this. So we don't have a governing body, and that can pose certain challenges with keeping the industry safe, informed, and accountable for its
Mhm.
practices. Um, that being said, I recognize that if we established a governing body, we'd be closing doors behind us that I was able to walk through because I don't have a medical
Mm.
degree or some sort of PhD in
Yeah.
psychology. But I really do view my work here as a crossroads between I really feel myself as part musician, part monk or shaman, and part physician. And none of those are roles that you just like buy the clothes on Amazon and then you're like, I'm a monk now. I bought robes. I'm a monk. I carry the book and you can pay me tithings. Like, or I bought a bone saw and I'm a surgeon now. Like, and I know that that feels a little cringy because we don't have the training in this industry. But when I look at these forums online for practitioners that are interested in wanting to get involved, the two questions that I really see that kind of irk me are, so I just like put bowls on the body. It's like, well, I'm not an LMT, so I just rub the muscles. Then I charge you money, right? That's all we do. Okay. Or my favorite is like, well, how do I guide the meditation? It's like, why are you selling a meditation event again if you don't know how to meditate? So I don't want to discourage people from exploring this industry because again, we don't really we know where the craftsmen are. We know like what the historical background of these instruments are, but the practices are totally subjective. That being said, do we in this culture rush to immediately monetize every hobby and interest that we have? Sure. And I'm so glad that people have these wonderful experiences that they want to share them, but I do encourage them to seek out some form of please basic training and knowledge. My biggest fear is giving just enough information to put people in a dangerous situation where they're
Mm.
like, well, Ben said we could do this. It's like, this is just a completely off the cuff conversation. We haven't talked
Yeah.
about any of the actual contraindications, the technique, like here's what we need to look for, here's how we take this to the next level. Like, what if someone has an ab reaction? How do we guide them through that? Do you have your trauma informed training? Are you aware of colonial implications in this country and or around the globe? Are we honoring other indigenous traditions and making sure we're not profiting? My pet peeve is when people do sound baths in a teepee. It's just like, as a white
Mm.
person, you're just like, don't do that. Don't, like, I come from a Lakota heritage. My ancestors were murdered. Like, don't hold this in a teepee because it looks cool. Like, that's not cool. So it's a bit of a hot button for me of like making sure
Yeah.
that are the teachers that you're working with, do they have some sort of formal training in music, in therapy, in energy medicine? I don't know, but and unfortunately, I don't think there's nearly as many qualified teachers as there should be.
So what I'm getting is that you are ultra passionate about this work. And my takeaway from that is that you do believe that more people should be empowered to do so. And I think the question that we're still left exploring is, um, what does that look like? More specifically, like, is there some governing body without actually like being too restrictive, that this is potentially something that many people want to do, and we don't want to necessarily make it like impossible for that to happen.
Yeah, it just needs to start with a core. I don't want to say like core education because that's got some connotations for public education teachers and things. But no, we really don't have like the pillars of these different realms. You know, like Eileen McCusick and Seren Shrestha and Diane
Yeah,
Mandel and Broder Oken. Like these guys haven't all sat down and said like, hey, do we all agree? Chakras. We're all in agreement. Chakras. You all okay? Chakras good. We're going to talk about chakras. Do we all agree bioenergy field? Like we can't agree on simple things. So it's really,
yeah,
I mean, it's going to be a long time before we sort it out. But I think for the average practitioner, just knowing that the optics of this are really important, that there are so many stories of people getting into a sound bath where someone finally got off leash from their office job and is just wailing on gongs all day and then charging money. And it's like, but that's not a good experience necessarily. Like you might have actually caused this industry to slip backwards through that
yeah.
because of an ego trap or toxic positivity. That's the other one. So also being careful of the teachers that you find aren't misleading you for their own gain or leading you on. There's a teacher that we're struggling with right now that we're noticing the value of his students shift depending on what their sales tab is out the door. And that's a
Interesting.
yeah, that's a challenging thing sometimes. So it's like, okay, like I'm so if I didn't buy a bull, am I not worth anything to you? I'm good at the moment, but that doesn't mean that I don't have value. So we got
Mm.
to make sure that we're just in constant vigilance of who we're working with and what everyone's intentions are.
If you could wave a magic wand, what solution would you create for this?
Man, that's a wonderful question. The magic wand would have to come back to our, it's so big. It would have to be our societal lexicon for how we uh, attain medical wellness in this country in the
Mm.
US. Like we don't have a system of national health care, so can't
Yeah.
figure it out, but 33 other countries have figured it out. We don't have to guess again. Like we know how to do this, we just have to do it. So if we had a better balance in our own culture of like how do we afford healthcare, what is affordable healthcare, what's the holistic approach to healthcare, and making sure that those practitioners are just as valued as the Western practitioners. If you break a femur, don't come see me. I cannot put your femur back in. But if you're struggling with opioids or benzos on the other side of that, yeah, pain management, come see me. Sure, we can get you off meds. That's not a
Mm.
problem. But there's
Yeah.
room for both in the world, and we have to make room for both.
That's powerful. Yeah, I mean, I've read like, I think something that I've been rereading lately, I actually keep it on our coffee table and I use one copy of our book as a coaster because that forces me to constantly like pick it up and read it when I don't have it there. And I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it's Dr. Mitch Gaynor's book,
Right.
who was the neurologist, who came to the power of crystal singing bowls, but all sorts of. Yes, Sounds of Healing by Dr. Mitch Gaynor, who is a neurologist. And so right now, what it seems like is you just like can't tell who's going to find their way to this modality and
Totally.
like utilize it in their practice, whatever their practice actually is.
Yeah, there's a sound engineer in upstate New York right now, and I don't remember his handle or his name offhand, but he's using these Dragonfly mallets, and he just picked up a copy of my book and has been putting together these really cool, complex recording projects. Pardon me, and it's fascinating to hear like that's what he's getting out of this as a recording engineer who spends his whole day in headphones listening to all of these isolated frequency patterns like and my experience is totally different. I mean the sounds that I hear and perceive are going to be completely separate from what you hear and perceive, and we can't sing pitches that we can't hear. I mean there's so much about the psychoacoustics of this that is endlessly fascinating
Mind blowing. Okay,
and
so I
universal.
want to acknowledge something that I'm 7 minutes longer than I promised, but I want if you could bear with us for 3 more minutes, would that be okay? I want to close with something that's really special, I think.
Me or the audience?
You.
Oh yeah, I'm great. Time's not real.
You. Okay. So many of you here, both in the recording and here live in real time, have definitely either seen me play this or you've actually gotten one. And Ben, right, is the gentleman who designed this. So of course, I didn't even plan for this, but I had it laying on my desk and I was like, oh, perfect. This is the time that we should really talk about this. Would you talk about the development of this wand and why, and just share anything you'd like to share about it? Because it's fantastic that you're here to talk about it. We
Thank you.
love it, by the way. It is like absolutely incredible. We are so, so, so thrilled to be able to offer it at the Ohm Store. I have a box of like 40 of them here. We sometimes add them to special orders. We offer them for sale as well, and we're work directly with Dragonfly. So first, thank you. Next, please share anything you'd like to share about the development of this and why you developed it.
Yeah, so I work in collaboration with Dinesh Joseph, who's the owner and founder of Dragonfly Percussion in Buffalo, New York. And Dinesh has been making high-level orchestral mallets for decades. His keyboard mallets we use in the conservatory. They're his artists, his sponsored artists are like Cynthia Ye, who's the principal of Chicago Symphony, Matt Howard, the principal of LA Phil. Like these are high-level players, like the absolute best in their field, and then they trust Dragonfly to help create the sounds that they that fill in the gaps in their based off of their hall or the types of music that they play or their own background and heritage. So in that to that end, when I got into basically I'm spoiled. So I got into the sound healing realm, but it was all the same stock mallets, and stock mallets being like just the mallet that they throw in because you bought a bull, and they're very effective, but the materials and the composite design and everything hasn't really changed in a couple thousand years. Like it's not really
Nope.
bone and felt now, but it's like wood and suede, and
Yep.
that's a great starting place. But like we have come so much further at the orchestra. We're using all manner of durometer, like hardness of plastics, of brass, of aluminum, of leather and chamois and flannel and all this stuff. So we're used to having a lot of hoity-toity, like, well, can you do something just like 4% harder? Or
Ah,
our favorite thing is when the conductors they start to learn the colors and they're like, what sticker are you using on xylophone? No, let's use the blue one, and and you'll kind of put your mallet out of sight and pull the same mallet out and play, and they're like, that's perfect, and nothing changes.
that was
So
really inside baseball. I had never known about that, but that's hilarious to learn. Thank you for taking me
yeah,
into
so
that
we've
world for a moment.
yeah, so we've got our own tricks and things. But basically, I wanted more shades and control than what I was getting, and particularly mallets that worked with the instruments that I use. So
Yeah.
my signature series is based off of the work that I do and the types of bowls that I prefer. So I use primarily, let's see a good one. These Jumka style bowls they have a thicker wall, and they're just for me the tone is a lot more potent and stable, and it tends to last a little bit longer with the right touch. On a thinner bowl, would my mallets work as well? Yeah, probably, but it depends on the touch. But anyway, so as I was working, just noticed like I don't love the length of the wood. It doesn't give me a lot of control. I do a lot of reaching over clients. Human landscapes are not what Vogue magazine led me to believe. You have to adapt all of that for real people. There are no straight lines in nature, as Alan Watts says, right? So we have
Yeah.
to adjust for curves. So one of the pitfalls of the traditional puja, that rubbing wand, is that it's a really thin piece of leather on a fairly heavy, harsh wooden core. And
Yeah.
without a lot of practice, and even with a lot of practice, that can sputter out sometimes. And it's not always my favorite experience. And when you're new to this craft, and especially working with clients and their nervous system regulation, I reached out and I said, "Hey, I would really like a wand that gives me a little bit more leeway so I can get a tactile sense, really feel connected to the instrument as I'm working around it, and bring out more of the vibration and less of that harsh, rattly kind of thing." And that sent Dragonfly down a pretty deep rabbit hole as we sent out to sort of use designs that we had seen in the orchestra and similar purposes, but repurposing them as well. The trade-off is that I facilitated my first end of life transition this summer. I think I just met you when we were talking about it,
Yeah.
and there is strong evidence that our sense of hearing is one of the lasts online. And so I told the family, if your relative chooses to pass, I will continue to play for another 15 minutes or so. to make sure that that process is complete. They did indeed pass, and I was so grateful to have that leather wand with me,
Mhm.
that I could hold that container for this person who's literally between two planes. And then the last thing that they heard wasn't this like, a white noise kind of startling them,
Yeah.
restart their heart or something, when they had a DNR. They got to go out on this very smooth, soft, luscious, just ride into the sunset. And it was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that we designed these for these types of moments.
Yeah.
But the whole series is meant to sort of fill in the gaps and provide different frequency elicitation from your bowls. So the feedback that we got immediately was like, oh my God, I'm hearing my bowl for the first time. And sometimes it was like, I'm hearing my bowl for the first time. And you're
Ah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
that'll
Yeah.
happen too. Yep.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that is I mean, what feels present for me is those are certainly some stakes where you'd want to have the best tool for the job. And in lesser stakes, I have personally loved using this. I know that even here in the comment section, they own one of your strikers,
Hmm,
wands, mallets. They love them. There has been a lot of just love in general about everything that you've been sharing here, Ben.
hmm.
So
Thank you so much.
um, this has been a really energy giving conversation. It was everything that I imagined it would be and more. I think that every time I've had the pleasure of being in your presence and just listening to your thoughts, ideas, wisdom, and receiving guidance, it has benefited me personally greatly. So, wow, thanks for taking some time and having this conversation in kind of a non-traditional way, like real time on Facebook. It was just a lot of fun. And I just thank everything that you are giving to the sound community. I am resonant with your vision of a way forward, even as we continue to think like what that might look like. But Ben, thank you so much. This was incredible. And you can also find Ben, as you know, at zenwithben.me. On the website, zenwithben.me, you can get in touch with Ben if you are local to Boulder and would like to schedule something. You can see his new book and you can buy his new book. What else could they do on your website, Ben?
Oh, I mean, there's links to the first book, Mindfulness for Musicians. There's a lot of background information on the mallets. So there's recordings and sort of deeper dives into there as well. They're free meditation. I publish a lot of articles. So I'm a busy dude, but it's all there on the website. And if you have any questions, let us know. I think the big thing, right, is we've got two classes coming up for the Ohm Store. So I'll be teaching two workshops.
Ben will be teaching as a part of Sound School. We are so lucky to have Ben, as you've seen here. If you've enjoyed Ben's teaching style, if you've enjoyed his like purposeful dedication to people being empowered in ways that are ethical and based in service, then I think that you will love, right, to learn more from Ben with the Ohm Store Sound School. And then if you'd like to go direct with Ben, you can find him in the ways that we've described. Ben, again, this was just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming and do this. We will, of course, talk and see you soon.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks everyone for being here. Bye. Okay, let's see, Ben. I turned that off. And did I turn the recording off? Now I turned the